Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to Build. I am your host, Ricky Camilleri. My next guest is one of the funniest comedians around, and for the first time ever, he's bringing that funny to an HBO special. But there's a twist. For the first time, Gary Gulman is using his stand-up to talk about something he's always kept hidden, his struggles with depression. In the Great Depresh, Gulman doesn't just perform a stand-up special, he introduces us to his childhood home, his mother, his wife, his psychiatrist, all of it culminating in a beautiful one-man show about the stigmas, the shame, and the alienation surrounding mental illness, and the triumph when one comes through the other side. Let's take a look at Gary Gulman's The Great Depresh.
I have no idea how this is going to go. Is it possible that this subject isn't even funny?
It was a long time since I shot my last special. I got very sick with the Depresh. I grew up in the 70s, and the only antidepressants we had access to was Snap Out of It and What Have You Got to Be Depressed About? That was the second leading brand of antidepressant.
Happier kid you couldn't find. Always had a smile on his face. So how could I detect anything?
This is a book I wrote in the second grade. It was called The Lonely Tree, and to anybody with a small amount of psychology knowledge, you would know this was a cry for help.
But I know my Depresh is in remission.
And I'm only comfortable talking about it now because I have come out the other side.
I wanna be your rock.
Therapy saved my life. I believe I broke my therapist. Yeah, I was leaving his office and I was shutting the door and I heard him go.
Some days you'll feel great.
It's interesting because millennials take so much flack from middle-aged men talking about participation trophies. Their argument is, how are they gonna learn how to lose? How are they gonna learn how to lose? Oh, they'll get some practice. Are you familiar at all with life?
Take it as it goes. Take it as it goes.
Everybody, please welcome the great Gary Gulman.
Hi. Thanks for coming.
Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations, man. Both on the special and also on coming through the other side.
Yes, that's the most important part, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the last time I saw you was maybe before that happened. I think it was at the last studio, maybe a couple of years ago. 3 years ago was your last special?
It's possible that I was in the midst of it just because that's the nature of it. You really put on a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does being a comedian or having to put on a show help put that show on?
I think so. While it's helpful, it helps because there gets to be a point where you can't even function.
Right.
And it's so clear that you're messed up, shaking, and my voice was off. But I will say it when it's in the middle somewhere, getting on stage and being in front of people and being around people and getting that little shot of dopamine from making strangers laugh, that was very helpful, and that was something to look forward to. But then there comes a point where I can't even get out of bed, so that's when it gets serious.
You know, there's the cliche about comedians that they're dark-hearted, they're sad.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I liked about The Great Depresh is that it's not about that at all.
No.
In no way are you talking about this as a justification for your comedy or vice versa.
Right.
Did you fear at all, like, that you would inadvertently tap into that cliche by talking about depression in your stand-up?
Well, it's possible, but I have such a drive to be different and original that I'm careful about not treading that well-worn path. But I will say that I don't think that comedians are any more depressed than the average American. I think comedians might just be more comfortable sharing private things with strangers.
It's their job to share private.
Yeah. So I think they're more open to that and they're not ashamed, whereas a lot of people, well, just even for their job, they can't really come out and say at their job, hey, I slept until 2 p.m. today or things like that.
It's like no one says comedians seem to have more problems with their significant others than normal people because that's
exactly.
all that they yeah.
Wow, that's very insightful. Yeah, Ricky, you're right on there. Yes.
So when you came out the other side and you started to realize that you wanted to talk about this on stage, what was that process like?
Well, I had a very nurturing environment in Harvard Square in Cambridge where the owner, no matter how bad I bombed, he would let me go on at the end of every show and do as much time as there was left. So that was very helpful. I had permission to fail, which is huge in any endeavor, that you not put so much pressure on yourself to succeed and do well. So that was very helpful.
But can I ask, what kind of strength did it require to start working on? I mean, you come out the other side of being, debilitatingly depressed, right? And we should really say that we're not talking about depression in the sort of I don't feel I'm sad kind of way. We're talking about mental illness, sickness in some ways. And you come out, yet you're comfortable going on stage bombing and trying new material. How did you find that strength, or did that in itself give you strength?
Well, I think, yes, I think that's a good point, that both of them gave me strength. But I think the real strength is getting through it. And then I was so grateful because I was on the brink of giving up stand-up and trying to find a new line of work that didn't require so much stress and worrying about coming up with new material and new jokes. So I was so grateful to be performing again, and whether I killed or whether I had a hard time, I was just happy to be up on stage. So I think that was part of it, but also I had this new purpose, which was to sort of bear witness to this crippling depression I had and try to get some revenge or redemption from it by making it funny and lightening it and sharing this and making the audience or members of the audience who could relate and understood or had a friend or a family member who suffered, that they would understand and feel less alone with it.
I love the idea of getting revenge.
Yes.
By talking about it.
Yeah, that's a lot of comedy, though. Somebody cuts you off in traffic and you tell a story about it on stage and it gets a laugh and you think, well, I won because I turned it into something positive.
But that is so true. I mean, I think so many people find strength in realizing that they can talk about it and be open about it. Because
definitely.
There is still an incredible amount of stigma surrounding mental illness, a lot of what is unknown for most people and what they can't understand. And I think so often people who struggle feel like others perceive them as weak rather than sick.
Yes. I think that initially I was afraid, and when I say initially, when I was 19, when I was first diagnosed with depression, I was ashamed, and I didn't think people would understand, and they would think of me as weak and or weird or crazy or mentally ill, and so I kept it to myself. But when I started to open up about it, especially on stage, the feedback from the audience and the emails and the people I met after the show was so positive, and they felt understood, and they shared with me their stories. So it was actually the exact opposite of what I intended or feared. And what came out was that there was actually a hunger for somebody to open up about this and make them feel seen, heard, understood.
Did you find that the more you kept it to yourself, the more you were unable to discuss it with other people, the harder it weighed, the more it weighed on you?
Definitely. It was something I remember in college sneaking into my therapist's office so that nobody would see me, and then sneaking back out. And so it required a lot of energy to cover a lot of questions. There were lies that I was telling to I had a college girlfriend who never knew that I went to therapy. She just thought I had a meeting of some mysterious club or something that I was going to every Thursday at 2 p.m.
You're like a member of the Skull and Crossbones in this fantasy.
Yes, and I had to sneak my medicine late at night so that nobody would see it, and I would have to hide it, and I wound up in the hospital from the depression, and I told nobody outside of my family, and covering that up. Where have you been for 3 weeks? What have you been
You're talking
doing?
about the most recent
Yeah,
stay?
the most recent hospitalization. Yes, so I covered that up for a while, and then when I revealed it, nobody made fun of me, or nobody said, "Oh, I better not hang around with this guy. He's crazy," or anything like that. It was just a fear I'd built up inside me, and it was completely unnecessary.
Well, I think, and you really tap into it in the Great Depression when you talk about all we know about hospital stays is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
Yes.
Nest, or
Girl Interrupted.
or Girl Interrupted,
Yes.
where the hospitals
Yes.
are vicious and
Yes.
they don't treat the patients well, and they just want to
Yes.
keep them in there
Yes,
for
it's
their
a
money
horror
or
show.
something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's frightening, and it's been stigmatized, and it couldn't be further from the truth. My stay was very ordinary. It was much like a regular hospital ward, and
It's far more like the Dream Team with Michael Keaton and Christopher Lloyd, and they're
Yes,
just
but unfortunately, it didn't do well at the box office, so nobody knows how much fun the psych
group
ward
of
can be.
idiosyncratic men.
That's so funny. Yes.
When, one of the things that I'm curious about is there's been this, I think stand-up is evolving in a lot of ways.
Sure.
To become a hybrid often of like a one-man show and stand-up. You started in stand-up, right?
Yes.
When you start in stand-up and you're doing open mics, you're just trying to hit joke after joke after
Right,
joke.
right.
And now that you've sort of tapped into this very personal side of your stand-up, it seems like you feel much more comfortable stretching the bounds of what stand-up is. Do you feel like you did that with the Great Depresh? Were you thinking about that?
I wasn't thinking about that. I knew that my audience that I've developed over the years and cultivated through my appearances, that they were very patient and would pay attention and
Why do you? What makes you think that?
well, if you go to a regular comedy club and the audience is expecting jokes about sex and drugs and alcohol, and you go up there and you say, I spent 3 weeks in the psych ward, then they very often get uncomfortable and they stop paying attention. So I have an audience that came to see me, so they give me a lot of leeway. But I will say
Ones that stayed in the room.
I will say first and foremost that this had to be funny, because that's what I do as a stand-up. But I also knew that I had built up some goodwill by being funny, so that I could talk about things for a minute or so without having any jokes, just telling the narrative of my fall and then my recovery, and I think it's clear from the performance I give that I'm currently thriving.
You're currently thriving?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that there's hope.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's presented in a stand-up way, and I think that not just stand-up has to be funny, but anytime you go to a one-man show,
Right.
whether it's someone speaking their truth or it's an actor, like a story generally has to be pretty funny.
Right.
Right? Because that's what
Yes.
sort of brings an audience's empathy in.
Yes.
And then you can kind of turn that around and give them the
Yes.
sad, and then they feel it even more.
Right, yes.
And I think what you're doing here is you have a point that you're making, and you're getting to this place where you are describing an intensely painful moment for you.
Sure.
And I think in some respects, removing the jokes from that a little bit so that the audience can feel that. You're not undercutting your pain in any way. Was that difficult for you as a natural comedian? Were you kind of like, okay, I have jokes about this, but maybe that will hurt what I'm trying to say?
Right. That's a great question, and it was a tightrope that I walked, but I had help from the director Mike Bonfiglio and from Judd Apatow in arranging the set, the narrative of the comedy show, and where the jokes would go, and what we would build to, and how we would tell the story. But also, this is a hybrid where there's some documentary footage that sort of informs and amplifies some of the points that I make within the stand-up. So I think it holds together well as a narrative, but also as a stand-up show that you could sit through without being bummed out or getting antsy in your seat.
Yes, you don't get bummed out or antsy.
Right.
I hope
yeah.
I'm not.
No. But when I hear one-man show, I think
I
of
agree.
a guy with a table lamp and a really sad story with a couple of jokes in there. But I
was born on the Lower
Right.
East Side in 1970. My dad was over
yes,
there. No,
he's bouncing a basketball. But
there are much better
right.
one-man shows
Yeah,
than that.
right. But I think that the Mary Poppins principle, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So the spoonful of sugar are the jokes, and then the medicine is sort of talking about literally the medicine, the 19 medications that I took before I found something that worked for as long as it has. Yeah.
That's an incredible point that you say, as long as it has.
Right.
Because you make the point, you make the point in the special that when you struggle with mental illness, when you struggle with depression, oftentimes you find something that works and then that suddenly doesn't work anymore, and you need to change it up, and something else happens.
Sure, that's very frustrating, and thank God I found something again that worked. But there were 2.5 years where nothing was working, and I tried a number of different treatments that were marginally successful, and one was very successful, ECT, which bums everybody out again because of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But
or Requiem for a Dream.
Yes, electroconvulsive therapy is very misunderstood, but really helped me, really turned the tide for me.
When that was proposed to you, how scared were you?
Oh, I was horrified. Yeah. I was horrified. How can I do that to my brain? But the more I learned about it, and the more I read about it, and the more advocates for it that I talked to, the better understanding I had, and the results were dramatic and quick and long-lasting.
When you decided to do a documentary special hybrid, how did that decision come to be, and did you have to talk your wife and your mother and your psychiatrist into being in it, or were they game right away?
Well, my manager is the one who came up with the idea first, and so by giving his encouragement, it was clear that he didn't mind me coming out, I guess you would say, or opening up about these treatments and the hospitalization, that he didn't think it would hurt my career or my image or anything. And then my wife and my family, they were very encouraging about this, and they met with the director, Mike Bonfiglio, and he was very smart in explaining what he was doing and how this was going to help people, and so it was easy to get them on board for that. But that's a good question, because I imagine there are some people who would say, I don't want to be a part of this, but they were very helpful. My mother was nervous about not looking well, because
and also
mothers are like that. Yeah,
I'm sure she was. I mean, not well. Do you mean like just visually? Or?
Visually, yes. She kept saying, "Is there any way?"
She did the thing.
Yes. Is there any way Judd can make me look thinner? And I said, he's a director, so he'll do his best. But I think you look like a perfect mom.
She was like, I heard about this de-aging in The Irishman. I thought maybe that you guys could do something like that.
Oh my gosh.
Industrial Light and Magic.
Right. So she would look, 30 years younger. That would be amazing. Yeah, she would have loved that.
Did she have any fear? Oftentimes, even when parents understand that it's not their fault, that there's really nothing that they could have done, you just can't take away that guilt. Did she fear in any way that, she would inadvertently come across that way, or that, like, opening herself up to this, people would judge her, or she would even judge herself, or is she past that?
I think she's past that, but also I think she represents most people that especially in that generation. And when I grew up, we didn't really understand the difference between any of the mental illnesses. You were just mentally ill, and we felt sorry for you, but there was really nothing we could do, and we didn't really understand the symptoms. And so this, I think, will go a long way in educating people. But also, I hold no ill will towards my mother for not understanding. Nobody, teachers, nobody really understood. It was very rare that people were aware and educated on that subject back then.
Now, I know you have another. Do you have another special that's coming out on top of this, or you're doing another tour?
I'm doing another tour
hour
with a new hour of material that I wrote in the interim between shooting this and it airing. So yeah.
Is the new material related to this, or do you feel like you, in terms of what you're like, I've moved past it a little bit and are?
Well, it's related.
You'll never move past.
It's related It's related in that it's personal, and I give a lot of my own stories and opinions and my feelings. But I think a lot of the Great Depresh was also about accepting yourself and your supposed weaknesses, or the things that you're ashamed by. Like, I grew up not really fitting into the traditional male roles, and that I wasn't very aggressive, and I didn't care for contact sports. I liked playing basketball and doing crafts, and there just wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of patience for sensitive boys in the 1970s. So
even in the 90s,
yeah,
it really
that's
wasn't.
true.
I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's true.
I think I tried the contact sports up until 9th grade, and then everybody was like really hard about it. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to the drama club.
Yes.
I do not like this.
Good for you.
Don't touch me. Like,
Yes,
I don't-
I know. It just, yeah, but there came a time in my life when I sort of had to forgive myself for not being the Clint Eastwood.
Love that joke. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was either Clint Eastwood
Or Richard Simmons. Yeah, there was no spectrum of masculinity back then. It was very stark.
Did you fear at all that, and maybe you've kind of answered this in a way already, which is why you didn't talk about it, or why you talked about your manager. If he was okay with you talking about this, then it was okay. Did you fear that doing an entire special really about depression would make you like the depression comedian, or hey, you're the depression comedian?
Right. Yes, I did think about that, and I thought, okay,
Worth
then I'm the depression comedian. If this makes it so that people think of depression when they think of me, and mental health when they think of me, and I can make a lot of young people or old people feel better about
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, then that's great, and I'm prepared for it, and I'm equipped, and I think it would be a great blessing to be that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. We have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who's right here?
Oh, thank you for having a question. I was hoping somebody would have a question. Okay, what is your name?
Hi, I'm Cyrus. It's
Hi,
great
Cyrus.
to meet you.
Great to meet you too.
So I was wondering, in a situation like out in the world where you like become angry or sad, or an interaction that would make you upset, is there like a turning point or a time where you may like look back and say, "Oh, that's funny. I'll put that in a bit." And like, how do you realize that or change that perception?
I think at this point, I can recognize the things as they're happening. So I had a woman cut me at Trader Joe's in line, and she was so rude and aggressive. And as I'm having this interaction, I say, I will get my revenge on stage. I will tell this story, and she will probably never see it, but I will win this battle.
Do you ever exacerbate those moments to see if you can get more material out of them?
Well, that's a great question, and sadly, yes. I become more dug in, and I become a wisecracking lout, yes, to bring about more friction. So, yes.
Like, you seem like you're having a moment right now. Let's take this a little further and see what comes
Yes.
out. That'll
Yes,
be great.
exactly.
This could be a 3-minute thing.
Yes, and it becomes a show for everybody around us at the Trader Joe's. So yes, at that point, I'm entertaining myself, but also workshopping new material. Yes.
One more right here.
Yes. Hi, I'm Natalie. Nice
Natalie?
to meet you. Yes.
Oh, hi, Natalie.
We are big fans of yours.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here
Thank
and
you.
for using your platform for something so positive.
Oh, thank you.
My question is, so you talked about the hierarchy of cookies.
Yes.
So the Nilla wafer versus the Nutter Butter versus the Oreo. Does the Oreo still have your heart?
Yes, the Oreo has my heart because it is.
It's amazing.
It's really amazing. It reminds me of the way Michael Jordan took over the NBA and then kept training and getting better, and Oreo just never sits back on its laurels. It continues to raise the bar and challenge itself. So it's
Stain the Oreo? Like,
well, no, by adding every single thing into its center that it possibly could, cake batter and true fudge and mint. It's relentless in its pursuit of dominance, and I admire it, but I also think we should at this point just get out of its way.
But at the same time, the original Oreo is kind of still where it's at. I mean,
yes.
Will you go with the fudge or the cake batter Oreo over the original Oreo?
Well, I will always take.
try them, but-
I will always take mega stuff at this point.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And I'll double it up and then dunk it. Oh my gosh, you brought, wow, this is not a plant. We did not work this out before. Oh my gosh, Natalie, somebody just signed up for Teacher's Pet. Thank you. Oh my gosh, Natalie.
Do people bring you Oreos often?
Yes, and I'm always grateful. because it's difficult to travel with them. They break. So yes, thank you.
She said something in her question that I think is interesting, saying thank you for using your voice to have a platform, or using this platform. And I wonder, you're a comedian, and I think people who tell jokes all the time primarily have just an inherent intrinsic issue with sincerity.
Yes.
Because you want to make fun and you want to be
Right.
ironic, and you can also see so many celebrities using quote unquote their platforms,
Right.
and sort of often see what is so like phony about that, and you want to make fun of it.
I know.
How hesitant were you, not just in terms of talking about your own personal issues, but how hesitant were you to suddenly be using a platform and to be the face of something more serious like this?
Well, I didn't hesitate at all. I think one thing that I've tried to adhere to is being different from all the other comedians. And when many of the other comedians are being sarcastic and being cynical and skeptical, it's easy to be different from them by being earnest and sincere and being myself.
I'm sure you are not like an overly cynical comedian.
Right. I'm very optimistic, and I've always felt that optimism and pessimism were equally effective predictors of the future, but optimism was a lot more fun and kept me healthy mentally when it was able to. So I have no problem then transitioning into being sincere in my trying to help people and make people feel a little bit better, but also feel less alone. That's the one thing that kept coming up over and over again in the meet and greets and on emails, that the people felt less alone with their illness. So that was very gratifying to me.
When did you find, and it's very true, you on stage come off as like the nicest comedian, when did you find that was your voice? Because I'd imagine when you first started comedy, you flirted with different voices,
Right.
like most comedians do, because you have
Yeah.
influences. But when did you find that your voice was one that was somewhat optimistic and like a really sweet, nice person telling funny stories?
Probably like 5 or 6 years in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, because I tried to be like some of the harder guys in Boston and New York, and I just
Boston.
Yes, and I couldn't go far enough. Those guys were really
That's
really
like
out
where
there.
Louis was started, and
Yes.
Maron started, and
Yes.
Cross started. Yeah, there's like
Yes.
pretty
Yes,
deep roots in like
Dennis Leary,
Massachusetts
yes.
cynicism.
Yes, totally. Yeah, and so I tried to zig while they zagged. Yeah.
Well, Gary, I love the special so much.
Ricky, thanks for watching. A lot of people that interview me haven't seen it, so
well, they're fucking assholes.
well, they're unprofessional.
Yeah. It premieres October 5th on HBO at 10 p.m. That is Saturday, Sunday?
Saturday night. Yeah.
Saturday
from
night.
10 to 11:15. Yes. And I will be live tweeting cute comments and inside information.
I think from 10 to 11:15 is very funny. For
10 till question mark.
The great Gary Gulman, everybody.
Thanks,
Let's
everybody.
hear it.
Thank you. Thank you.